I just had an acupuncture appointment. I'm going to try acupuncture for a few weeks because it's coming upon the time where I could have a bit of a crisis. It's the 7-month mark, I think. So this next month and a half, something could happen like that. And I've heard acupuncture can be helpful for transconsciousness. And I feel pretty relaxed after that appointment. It was $200 American though. So hopefully I'm doing the right things for myself, and I created some bracelets like this that I want to give away as gestures of friendship. And I'm hoping that I can get in alignment with whatever it is I'm meant to get in alignment with in this next while. It's kind of do or die time. That's how I feel. And we'll see how that manifests. I started taking some doTERRA oils. I got their little family essentials kit, which has lavender, lemon, peppermint, their blend called Breathe, Deep Blue, melaleuca, which is tea tree oil, frankincense, oregano oil, digestion, which is another one of their blends, and On Guard. They're all supposed to do different things, and it comes with a cool book to start to understand what some of them do, as well as information about ones that I didn't get, so I'll buy more. And it's a nice book. And so my digestion's been off, so I've been taking some of that internally and using the Digest Zen lavender and melaleuca internally, as well as a drop of frankincense. Frankincense is supposed to be good for so many things, especially anti-cancer. So I do a drop of that under my tongue. The other 3 I do in a bit of water. And then I wear the On Guard and the Deep Blue. And the On Guard beadlets, you can eat these. So these are also supposed to help protect from, quote, negative energy from the outside. So I think it's helpful to try these new gestures, and I don't know too much about these oils, but I kind of trust it because I know enough about health in general to trust good things when I see them, and also wanting to try, because I've been on the Peter Smith program for a year, but I still need something more, I think, especially if I really want to meet life and the challenges that are going to be brought my way, especially if I start speaking up more, not only to myself. I can't shrivel and fall apart with every little comment or challenge. I need to be able to rise to that, for sure. I also got in the mail a bunch of these hair ties, which I like to wear as wristbands and give away. These are really cool. There's so many different cool ones. And this is fun. Maybe I'll get more of these. I like these ones. And I also am making some of my own, which I've made a crate one, and the cosmos, and then the rainbow ones. They're kind of fun to make too. So I'm going to work on this gesture project, and also on something related to that. I have a good idea for that, and that's something I think I'm going to work on as well. Yeah, things are going well. They're challenging. I'm going to go back home. Plans sort of happened that I'm going to go back home early. I'm going to go back leaving on the 20th of January. So I'll be going back to Canada in the cold, but there are reasons for that I'll talk about later. And I think it'll be good to reset and go from there and do some work and sort of focus back there. So I'm going to take my oils and get on with my day. And today I have a note in my phone about how today is 7.5 months since my last crisis. So it usually happens again between 7.5 and 8.5 months. 8.5 at the longest. So this next month, I need to take extra good care of myself. It's 1 month until I go to Celine Dion. So I could really be peaking at the crisis when I'm going to see Celine Dion, but hopefully it's really living a dream of mine in that time of crisis. If I can live a dream that I've been wanting for years and years right at the moment of crisis, I think I'm pretty free from the dysfunctionality of what can happen with this whole transconscious process. Last night, I kind of hit the wall, but it was pretty gentle and mild. And as I said, the last couple months have been really magical and everything, and just lived the magic mostly and didn't really talk about it. And I've experienced a slowing down. Someone even noticed, they said, "You're slowed down." And I experience it as when I'm trying to take my vitamins out of these cases that I organize. It's like very slow, like it's really hard to get them out. Whereas usually I'm sort of like kung fu moving through the world and able to carry 5 things at once. And also my backpack that I carry with me, call it my magical backpack. Same stuff in it as always, and today's the first day it feels heavy. Oh, so those other states of consciousness, those more energetic states, everything feels lighter, everything is less dense, everything's easier, more effortless. And now, last night I experienced, when I was falling asleep, same sort of thing. My heart was like, and it felt like my brain was just like dying and like imploding. But there wasn't really any fear. I could feel myself resisting it a little bit or wanting to get up and knowing that I couldn't. But it doesn't last very long. And then after that, I had to get up and use the washroom, and then I just went to sleep. So, no matter what I do, this can sound kind of sad, like, oh, no matter what I do, how many vitamins I take, if I do doTERRA oils and spend $200 on acupuncture, the same thing kind of happens, this same cycle of every 7.5 to 8.5 months of this rapid deceleration. But I feel like the mood state is pretty much decoupled from it, in that I know what's going to happen and I still know how to function. I know how to get up and shower and eat. And so when there's less energy to do whatever, get back to basics and at least do the basics. And one might think, well, if I'm in this lower energy state, I feel depressed, so I don't get up and I don't shower. But if one can still get up and shower and look nice on days when one feels slow, I don't even call it depression anymore because I don't feel depressed. If one can do those basic things, one won't be as apt to be depressed. And then also say, I'm ready to go and everything, and I don't really have anything to do, or I'm not working as much or something. For example, if I'm dressed and ready to go and a friend calls me, I can go and I feel good. But if somebody calls me and I'm not ready, then I could be like, oh, I don't feel good, I'm not dressed, I'm not showered. So doing the basics anyway, even if I'm not doing this or that, can be helpful. And I'm not saying that's what my situation is now. But I am in California, and I knew that I would be experiencing this while down here. But since I experimented with getting through it in June on Vancouver Island, I knew that I could get through it, and I didn't have to use that as an excuse to not come down here, thinking I might think, oh, I'll be in crisis. Whereas last year I came down here and I wore a bracelet, like a medical health bracelet every day, saying, oh, bipolar 1 and all this. Now I don't really feel that need to be all that safe because of the strength I've built to deal with these changing states. And it's not even a personal thing, the whole of reality feels different. It's a whole other world of experience, and it's not bad. I experience it as it's really hard to sustain and maintain those high energy states and go on being creative and in perception action and being able to do so much for so long. But I really did get a good harvest out of this one, and being in this energy and being in relationship a little bit. I wrote down a lot of song lyrics. I wrote down quite a few insights, not as many insights. I wrote down quite a bit of structure for more of what I might want to create. So it was a really good harvest. But the wave is over. So I was thinking, oh darn, I didn't create with that wave of energy, but it could be that when one slows down, that's the time to sort of sit down and put some of those ideas into motion, because in the higher energy state, the faster brain state, starting to create some of the ideas that one sees only creates more ideas. So it doesn't really seem like the ideal state for actually carrying out the ideas, because there's just too many, and then one gets lost in all those ideas. So I feel like that state is good for writing down ideas, and then when it slows down, it's good for maybe taking action on some of them, because the brain is so slow and the body's so slow that even if it does have ideas, it's hard to act on them, like new ones. And the brain isn't as energized to make new ideas or create new ideas or see new ideas, but it has enough energy to sort of move and do things and maybe focus more. So last year when I had this 2 cycles ago, I worked at a warehouse and just made some money while I was in like psychosis and feeling awful. But hey, why not use that time to work instead of being in a psych ward when one can get to that point? And then when there's the good energy, one can work on one's own creative projects and live a dream, as opposed to, well, now I have energy, so I'm going to go work. And then when I don't have energy, I'm going to sit at home and be depressed. One can actually get to a point where one works it out the other way. And I feel hopefully I'll be in a creative space where I'm creating my own projects all the time and always working. And really, I am always working. I am working on quite a few things right now. I'm going to be putting up posters for a certain group. I was offered to do that. And I'm going to take the Subjective Reality Deep Dive course by Steve Pavlina. Peter Smith sent me a big long document to read on a meditation for bipolar, because I was supposed to do his half an hour a day for 6 months, but I just can't. He says if you forget once, you got to start again. And I forget everything. So it's really hard to do something where there's pressure to remember. And then I need to review the Balancing Brain Chemistry documents that I have again, because of how the crisis is kind of here. And, you know, the bracelets project. So there's lots on the go. It's hard to find time to do it right now because of other things that I'm doing. So yeah, learning how to function, learning how to kind of rapid cycle, learning how to be capricious and be okay with rapidly changing the way I manifest depending on who's there and what's happening and how things change radically within someone else and responding. And it's quite interesting, really. So I just need to get through this month, get to Celine Dion, and as long as I can sleep. Now, I do have extra medications to take if I really have to, but last night I fell asleep just fine. And there's probably more to talk about, but I have to go do something. So just wanted to check in, and it's kind of crappy that I didn't capture much of the beautiful thing. Well, I did. I didn't take videos of myself talking, but I captured a lot of beauty, so I will share that. I haven't edited videos since I've got here, but I don't have time, so I'll have to do that later someday. So yeah, that's what's going on. One thing I noticed today was that my left eardrum was kind of spasming again. And I say again because a lot of times when I'm in this downward trend of energy, or I'm in that month of pre-crisis, or these experiences happening of this heart palpitation and these brain sort of implosions or brain palpitations, I also have left ear palpitations. I noticed that last October when I was having a crisis, my left ear would often be spasming. And when I use the Muse device, it often shows a lot of activity in the temporal lobes. And I feel that has something to do with how space and time are relative, and with this transconscious phenomenon, we are kind of going between different levels of energy. Like I was last night when I experienced that death thing, I woke up and everything felt heavier, more dense, more material. And I think there are spaces where we exist more as light and possibility and quantum and wave function type stuff. But there's often a slowing down because there is this gravity of the material reality. So yeah, I just wanted to tell myself that, yeah, that is happening. Left eardrum palpitation stuff. I could do the whole Muse headband measuring thing again, but I'm not as interested in measuring it now, now that I'm able to function more. It's not really a big deal. I'd rather function than sit there and measure the dysfunction. So yeah, it's a tool, but not allowing these tools of measuring and worrying and retrospecting take over the present moment now that can be lived. I'm saying this now. Who knows how this month will go? Could be a bit challenging, but it's different this time because there's someone that I'm exploring with. And today I bought Steve Pavlina's 60-day subjective reality submersion course because I feel like a lot of this stuff that happens in so-called bipolar is that this really big open subjective space opens up and we mistake it with objective reality, or there's some discordance there, or the vision and the subjectivity is so huge that we feel like it envelops others, but people are living in their own personal subjectivity, of course. But we make this mistake that everyone can see the vision and the wonderfulness that we can see when it is wonderful for a time. And maybe they can to some extent. Who knows? It's kind of like nobody wants to come out and play in this beautiful, subjective, wonderful world that we live in. Our subjectivity has been conditioned to this really narrow framework. And when people break out of that, it's kind of intimidating. Others can kind of smell it, and they eventually sort of run after the person and trap them and put them in a psych ward and have all these professionals giving them attention for the rest of their lives, when really that person had attention and was paying attention to this deep subjectivity that has some form of reality, but takes more people to dance in that shared space in order for it to manifest as more material, or making what's so dense and material more light and fun, and as of the quality of light, which is a lot faster than matter. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. I'll probably start that tomorrow, and I think it's a good thing to dive into now because I'll be going back to Canada in less than 2 months. So to really get in alignment with subjectivity and that I want to experience is important, because there are elements back home that would want me to be a certain way that I just am not. And I'm finding that my experience here is allowing me to get really clear about certain things, which can appear as like rigidness or harshness, but for me internally, subjectively, it feels like clarity. And I think it's a real gift that I'm receiving to get clear on certain things that have been an issue. And there's going to be more issues for sure in the future. So if I'm not clear on things that I can make clear now, it's going to be hard to be clear when things get even more challenging. And I just had an insight. I was in a certain situation and then something came to my mind that I sort of reacted to. So instead of sitting there with the reaction, I literally just stood up from my chair and left. And so something came to mind as like an insight for epigesturetics, for transconsciousness, which is, sometimes people can get in a space of feeling really intense feelings and then maybe acting out of those strong feelings. And so the insight was, make a scene or change the scene, meaning if we stay, we might make a scene, like get emotional or upset. But if we just change the scene, if we just get up and move, which our human bodies are designed to do, that could actually be a better action than sitting in the discomfort and then spreading it. There's something to sitting in the discomfort, but that discomfort is still felt. Even if we think we're hiding it, it's not really being hidden. But if we move based on the discomfort, like move away, not in terms of escape, but seeing that it's not something that we want to be puppeted by, change scenes, just move into a different room, talk to someone else, do something different. Like if we noticed that we were cutting ourselves with a knife or something, we might stop doing it and do something else. So I'm not saying that's ultimate, but it seemed to change the energy, and then it actually kind of worked. And then the other thing was something that can happen a lot, which is seeing something that happened and then explaining it or retrospecting about it. And something that I explore here is something called insight. And explaining or speaking from the past is an insight. So the insight that I had was wait for the insight. So the one is move, like if there's some kind of stuff there, or actually don't move, like don't move based on it, allow it to flower and wither and die. And moving the body can be a part of an acknowledgement of just allowing it to die too. But then in terms of that other element, it's wait for the insight. And that's not fully unfolded or really understood, but just wanted to spend one moment talking about an insight. So it's a couple days after that brain implosion. I can't remember how many now. But the last 2 nights I slept really well. I slept fine. No heart palpitation things. So I think it's been 2 good sleeps since that night that sort of brain death happened. And my body's feeling a lot heavier and slower, but I'm still functioning well. Today I had a strong urge to read through my balancing brain chemistry notes that Peter Smith gave me to review, because there's so much information. So I had that urge because I need to remind myself of the different orthomolecular epigestures that I need to do depending on what kind of states come up for me. And today I'm feeling sort of objectively blind, meaning I kind of want to go to the beach later, but I almost feel like driving would be quite difficult. Subjectively, I'm not slow. I'm reading over these notes and comprehending them well. I'm able to read them, but I also feel kind of like, ooh, it almost feels as if I'm in this fine line of crossing over to a point where reading would be very challenging or impossible, or it's something that I wouldn't want to do. And that feels like that could happen anytime. And that could also be why I feel this urge to review them before I can't. And that's why I created this handy sheet, so I could quickly review things at a glance. But reading over it is very helpful, because even in the bit that I've read so far, I realized that I used to take Polygala and I ran out of it, and I didn't reorder because the shipping to Canada was a bit expensive. But here I have Amazon Prime USA, and you can get so much more on Amazon Prime USA. There's all this different kind of Polygala. There's the one from New Tropics Depot, which is the one I got before. But if I go on Amazon Canada, there's no Polygala Chinese Yangzhou powder, but here there is. So I might try to research which herbs I take that I can get in powder form on Amazon Prime USA and get those and start taking some as spoonfuls in like warm water, hot water. Peter Smith does give all these types of instructions in his documents, but for me at the time, it was a matter of the easiest way to use them, which was just to get the capsules of most things. I take powder of glycine. I did take capsules of glycine, but I ended up getting powder because it's quite a bit cheaper. And I think that's true for most of them, but it's quite challenging to take all these powders and things when one doesn't have a proper kitchen and setup. As it is, I have all that stuff there to manage, and so it's a lot. But I do think it's helpful because I haven't experienced a depression this whole year. I've had some slowing down in function, but even that is getting easier, and it's not very long lasting. So even though I haven't been able to completely taper off the medications, right now I'm on 2 quetiapine for 50 milligrams. My functionality is pretty good, even though I didn't really function the greatest in the summer back home because I just showered and sort of hung out in parks and rested. But that's okay. I still was able to like see friends and work a bit more before I left, and it was really enjoyable. So it doesn't really matter like how much one gets done when, because even in these last 2 months, I've like kind of downloaded lyrics and hear the tunes for probably about 30 different songs. Now, I don't have the skills to put them into songs right now in terms of, I have a bit of piano skills and electronic music making skills, but even just to hear the melody and try to translate that into some kind of music, like I can hear all the music and the lyrics and the melody, but so if I was fully trained as being able to produce that, I could sit down and do that, but I'm not. So that can be for later. And so there has been quite the harvest of that energy, of that creative energy. And that's the thing too, a lot of times when one is in that state of harvesting, there's so much information and so much beauty and so much art and creativity and richness. It's impossible to create it all. But if one harvests it, the brain feels like, okay, I harvested it. It's kind of like if there's a farmer who wants to save seeds or has this huge crop of apples and needs to make like jam and preserves and make it so these apples last, because the apples are perishable. They're going to decompose. But the thing is, if the farmer makes time to make them into preserves and to preserve them and to pickle things and to save the seeds, now they can eat and be fueled from the harvest for a long time. If they just put the pile of apples in a pile, they're just going to rot and be food for the other animals and stuff, which isn't a big deal. But the thing that I'm saying is these seeds and these fruits, we can harvest them and put them in like our preserves, like put them in our Apple notepad, put them in, videos of us talking to ourselves about our ideas. We can put them into audios of us talking about our ideas for later of what to create. We can write plans of, oh, I had all these ideas, but I don't have the skills to unfold them. So I need to take business classes, or I need to take electronic music production classes. Or I download a song, but I'm not interested in making music at all. Maybe I can share it with a friend and see if they want to utilize it. And maybe I can make a friend by reaching out to them and saying, hey, this is what I have. Do you want it? So we can share some of these. Or maybe it's a business idea and we can take it to a friend and say, hey, do you want this business idea? So we can figure all that out. And something that I'm going to do is put some of these ideas eventually into Basecamp. I'm learning how to use that a little bit here. So it could be cool to do that and then invite certain people to the teams. I don't know how to do this, but I think it could be something to put the information into. So then when people come along, it's already there and just saying, hey, this is what I have in that area. What do you think? Go ahead and use whatever you want. I don't care. Like, there's no way I can utilize all this information. So yeah, sharing it with friends, because there's some interesting stuff. And, so it was nice to be here and be in that harvesting state and be able to harvest a lot of it and also have a lot of it unfold, because this place is so beautiful. Now, if I went into the energy around like ugliness and not the greatest energy and not feeling safe to fully manifest physically, poetically as well, which I've realized can manifest as like capriciousness, rapid changes in mood. Though I don't experience rapid changes in mood, I personally experience rapidly changing the way that my behavior manifests, because it's based on the situation, and situations change rapidly, so I adjust accordingly. But with so many different people around, people don't really notice as much, because maybe I manifest around person A a certain way and person B is another way. But person B doesn't know that I manifest around person A the way I do because they weren't there. And then it gets more complex the more people that are around. But when there's a really loving space, people realize that it's okay for somebody to be joking around sillily with one person in one situation, and then at lunch with everyone be kind of quiet. It's just not a big deal. Whereas if there are people around that are really attached or like invested in how a person manifests, like family, then they're like, well, why did you change and what's going on? And they're looking for so many more motives and causes and measuring with their brain so much more. And those images that are projected, if you think in quantum physical terms, the observers affect the situation. You can't separate the observers, who's watching the situation, who's participating in the situation, from the situation. Everybody's bringing some element to the table. They're bringing their projections, and we're all sort of complicit in playing out of a lot of those in order to make people feel comfortable that the world they're projecting is actually what's happening, when it's not. But anyway, I won't talk about that too much now. I'm writing down a lot of things that hopefully I can create something a little more coherent and concise for people at some point. Might not be necessary. It might be necessary only to live my life and utilize the tools of people who are around me, like Steve Pavlina, starting to do his subjective reality course soon. That's why I need to study this orthomolecular stuff to know these gestures. But hopefully when I really get in alignment with the subjectivity, the inner subtle realm that I want to manifest objectively, and I'm really clear on that and able to say no to partial matches, as Steve Pavlina says, and no thank you. And learning the language of the quantum of no thank you to these Newtonian paths that come here, to be like trying to translate the quantum into what they see as how reality's unfolding, and being like, no, that's not how it is. That's not how it works. That's nice if that's how it works for you. Continue to enjoy that if you like, but that's not how it works for me. And saying, you and I, we're not really a we at this moment, and that's okay. Maybe some other moment now in the future, so-called future. But last night I had this really interesting experience with this man who, we talked about quantum physics, and I was trying to explain that a lot of times my brain works really fast, and I feel that it's sort of quantum, if you want it, as a metaphor at least, as opposed to Newtonian. So it can process a lot of information, see possibilities, and I explained a lot of the different past things. And it was interesting to present my story in the framework of the quantum brain coming online and the different things that have happened in my life, starting from when I was in my early 20s and I drank myself stupid and kind of had a seizure. And then after that, my whole perception changed. I was dizzy. I had like this chronic fatigue, like MS-like thing for years. And I was really afraid of it. And I lost my capacities to recall from memory. And I thought it was a bad thing. But really, I'm seeing it as, my perception changed. I could see like this weird energy everywhere. Like lines on the wall, like door frames were vibrating. So I think I just started to see things more like energy, and I didn't realize it. I couldn't recall and pass my university exams, but really my brain was relying less on memory. It was changing from focal vision to the whole visual field, like peripheral. And so I felt like I couldn't see anything because I couldn't really use my focal vision anymore. I was diagnosed with shopping mall syndrome, which is visual vestibular mismatch. Felt like the ground was moving underneath me. I was dizzy. So they said that my visual system was making up for my lack of balance in the vestibular system. And as such, if like a lot of my capacity of vision was devoted to that. And because of that, it felt like I couldn't see, and I had trouble seeing, and my body was numb. There were so many things. It took many years to recover, but I feel like now that's why I have access to the whole visual field, which is sometimes information overload. So here I am thinking that this all started with my bipolar diagnosis 7.5 years ago, but really it started a long time ago, 15 years ago, when I sort of damaged my brain with alcohol, quote. And, that led to a bunch of other stupid stuff. But I'm seeing the value in that now from this other perspective. But not to go into that too long right now, but I was telling the guy about C-minders, S-E-E minders. So instead of reminders, trying to use the mental images to remember things, leaving things out strategically in space. So when one has access to the whole peripheral vision, the choicelessness will just, at the speed of light, you'll see the object and remember what it is that you left it there for. And, like leaving your keys by the door, people do that, but you can leave other things in certain places so you remember to utilize them. And for me, if things are in cupboards, I don't remember that they're there. So I like to have things out. But anyway, another way is to practice like putting your hand here and seeing if you can see how many fingers you have held up by looking straight ahead. I remember a friend did that, and they kept putting fingers out like right beside me where I shouldn't really be able to see, and I could always guess. And that is an important thing, is to be more in all the whole peripheral vision field, because thought projects like a focal vision and it's looking for something in particular, and then we miss all of that's around us. And that doesn't even mean to be like a spiritual thing, like beauty is all around. It's like what you need is right in front of you, and you really can't act and gesture towards what's not even there. So why are we moving based on these mental movements of looking for what's not there, when if we really can see with our whole visual field what is there, we can act on those things, act with those things. And, maybe we have all these healthy wellness tools around us and we can't even see them literally because we're thinking so much about something else. And if we look around, we might be like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. All of a sudden we realize we can act on our environment, in our immediate environment. And when we do that in a fluid, choiceless, joyful way, it's like a fun game. Now I get to play with everything that's around me. And if that's really fun, like my gestures are interesting, and it's like a better game than anything else. And that's kind of what happens in so-called manias. We all of a sudden realize, wow, I can really interact with everything that's here, and what's right here is what I want to interact with now. And there's this immediacy, and that builds a lot of energy because we're acting based on what is, not on what we think should be. But at some point we see this great vision and then start acting on what we think should be, and that gets us in trouble because we take those visions personally, like we need to carry them out ourselves now, when that's the same thing as acting based on the ideas and thought. We're acting based on something that's not there. So it's lovely to see those visions and be like, wow, that's beautiful. And when the brain cells see those visions, when one brain sees it, it increases the capacity or the possibility that another brain will see it too. And the more people see the vision and realize, hey, there's nothing that we can do about that vision. All we can do is what's right in front of us now. All we can do is do what you can where you are right now. And that's something I learned from Dion B. Mall. That's what he says, doing what we can from where we are. And he also says in his Friends to Mankind movement, in considering you, consider another too, and may your success be the success of mankind. And those are very interesting principles. And I'm seeing that there's this thing about looking at one's conditioning, but there's also a movement beyond it. And I feel that this being in this body has been beyond it at times. And so one doesn't have to necessarily purposefully look at conditioning, sit down intentionally and do it, though one can. But when one sees it's possible to go beyond, there's something there, and the brain goes into these possibility states and wondering, well, what's really possible for my life now? And I've lived some of those possibilities, but now it's like there's also this movement of how to share that with other people to make this possible for others to, whether it's people who've been diagnosed or I don't know. So anyway, yesterday, I basically said to this guy, because a few videos ago I said people just don't want this, and if they don't want it, they don't want it. This guy, when I was explaining my brain and we were going over this book called, I think it was Quantum Weirdness, or by this Philip something, and there were a few points, like 6 points. And in what I'd shared with him, I'd already given examples of quantum at the macro level in my own life. And then the ones that I hadn't, I gave examples of that, like stories that I had that to me confirm that quantum exists at the macro level, like we can see it with our own eyes. If our brains are operating fast enough. If they're not, if they're in this Newtonian I want, and we're only looking for what I want, we can't see what's happening. We can't see the quantum weirdness. But in the quantum thing, he said, something can be in 2 places at once. So sometimes I've seen like 2 pairs of the same glasses in the same, like, it's impossible. There shouldn't be 2 pairs. One over here and one over there. But somebody that's looking for this or that is never going to see, this is impossible, that this is this there and it's also here. And now I have 2 pairs that I grabbed from 2 different spots, and this is impossible. But other people don't see that because, you know, even with a magic trick, and or those videos on YouTube where they change the scene and nobody notices that the person changed their shirt from red to green. How are we going to notice this quantum thing if we don't even notice something as simple as that? So noticing the quantum can be maddening too. And it was, and it is, because it's weird. It's impossible. It's beyond the possible. Like there's this conditioning state, which is limited and like Newtonian and projection of beliefs and all this like really lame stuff. And then there's, possibility. And then there's impossibility, which is, I have the book by Stan Groff called When the Impossible Happens. I haven't read it though, but I've been living it. So I don't know if I have to read it. So anyway, this guy basically got to this point where he said, I want this perception action. I want to be able to see this. I want to have insight. I said, he's like, kind of like, can you give it to me? I'm like, well, I really don't know. And I tried to talk about communion with nature because we are nature, and nature and Gaia and the cosmos has to trust us in order to give us this ability to have a fast brain and see a lot. Because with what we see, we must be responsible. And I've messed that up a million times, but it doesn't matter because you start again and you figure it out again. That's the thing with the self. It thinks, oh, because of this and because of this, it's game over and now I have to do this. Cause and effect. No, it doesn't work that way. Just start from a blank slate. Get back to the drawing board. And that's what the quantum does. It'll erase everything that you try to do if you mess it up. And it'll fix it if you mess it up, really. Because it trusts you, so you get to keep going. And try again as you in the same body. You could even be killed and get to try again in the same body at the same age. Sound impossible? Well, anyway, you don't want to go that way. You want to like be careful with your body and your life because that is a really challenging quantum path. So he said, I want it. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll try to give it to you. But I also said to him, you have to have a relationship with nature. He's like, well, I buy flowers and I look at them. I'm like, you know, talk to them, read them poetry, sing them a song, ask them about themselves, like really like try to develop this relationship. And I can go into that more later. And I was telling him about the story with the flies because that's sort of when it started. The flies came to me. Nature came to me for some reason. And it was kind of impossible how they wouldn't fly away. And that video is called The Fly Whisperer. So anyway, I see this like golden green light, and I've seen that magic land when I'm falling asleep and it feels like my eyes are wide open, but I realize, holy shit, that golden green light comes into my apparent daily waking consciousness. I just haven't really clued into that. So, you know, truth is a magic land. Truth is a quantum land. It's pathless, full of possibilities and impossibilities that can be transcended. So the book Quantum Jumps talks about this, and I read it at some point and then got really mad that they don't apply this thinking to people with mental health issues, but how could they if they've never had that sort of diagnosis and path themselves? So compassion. So with this guy, we stared at each other for I don't know how long, 5 or 10 minutes without blinking. I probably had to blink like 2 times, but we kept going, and he saw me aging. Like, he saw me at all these different ages, and we talked about it after. He's like, yeah, I saw you age, like you're an old woman. And I said, I saw you as kind of an old woman. And I'm like, whoa, past lives. And when you really look at someone this way, you see you don't know what they look like. It keeps changing and morphing. And then after, you know, you kind of see what you think they look like. But I realized that maybe his gift, when we really look at each other with love like this, we do give each other our gifts. Like, we give them the gift of looking with love, the light out of a loving eye. They do the same. Then we download their gift, and they download ours, and there's a mixture, and each brain starts to flower more. And I realized, well, the gift he kind of gave me was to see me get old. So maybe he kind of helped me stabilize in this path of, okay, just like grow up and get old now. Like, you don't need to quantum jump and like die and feel like you're dying. Just, not that that's a problem. It's not scary anymore. But I was like, thank you for seeing me old, because that probably increases the likelihood that I will get old and die instead of die at a young age. And I don't know why I saw him as kind of a woman, this old woman, what it was. But yeah, I told him a bunch of weird stuff, but when we were looking at each other without blinking and the greenish gold light came in, at least I could see it. I don't know what he could see. He said it looked kind of foggy, and it does make things foggy because everything turns into a wave and turns into energy. It's vibrating, and you know, it's not collapsed in the wave function of giving it like a sure form from the observation, because there's no observer. It's love is looking, and love would look and provide the openness for that being to be and be fluid and be what they are and change and morph. And so looking in that way and what one sees is also a manifestation of that gift of be what you are, you know. This person, if we're both conditioned to some extent, we're not exactly as we would want to be. Because who wants to be how others have said that we should be? But that blueprint is always there in the adjacent light miracle body. Always there for the compassion algorithm of the universe to come in and sort of save us from our mistakes when necessary. But otherwise, it lets us make our mistakes. But when we make a fatal mistake, sometimes miracles that are unexplainable by science have to happen in order for us to continue. And sometimes somebody's watching and then they're like, how the hell did that happen? That's impossible. When we could just say, wow, that's a miracle. Thank you. I'm glad that person survived, and move on with it. And yeah, because sometimes what happens is there are observers who have certain beliefs, but what happens obviously is something that is unbelievable and impossible by the laws of physics. And so when somebody sees that, it kind of blasts apart what they think is possible. So I gave the example of, I don't know, I heard a story years ago of a man or somebody, there was a plane crash and somehow someone managed to jump through the window of the plane and get out. And first of all, I don't even know if the glass broke or it did break. It did, but later they looked and their head wouldn't even fit through the window. So what happens is sometimes we go into being a wave. Like, we're both a particle function or a body and a wave body. Sometimes when it's absolutely necessary, there's a miracle, and basically the person just was able to jump through the wall of the plane and the window and, or bend time to shrink to be able to get through, or they're just meant to be saved. And then people come and say that was impossible. Well, we don't understand quantum physics, and the quantum would rather us not be in these terrible accidents and have to go into waves to save us, because others that see that are like, wow, that couldn't have happened, but it did. So the impossible can happen. Miracles do happen, and who knows why they happen to certain people and not to others. But it's possible. The truth is they happen to everyone, but we go on we jump to a different quantum world and then wake up from a bad dream if we die, but then others in that world experience us as dying, and then it's very sad, but we kind of go on, and then we're still with the same beings, and in our world we didn't die, so those beings are still in relationship with us. And so it's really, really messed up, because he was talking about the many worlds, or every possibility exists simultaneously. And if that's true, then all future possibilities exist. So everything that could be created has already been created, and it's a matter of which beautiful creation do we want to live out? Well, obviously the one we're designed for. And we can figure that out somehow. And that's where I am a little bit figuring it out. But before I left, I saw Dion Bimal speak, and he said, he did a talk and I listened, and I didn't feel like, I felt like I was seeking, but at the end he said, one thing you must do is share this with another. So last night was a bit of an opportunity to share this energy, and he asked for it. So I was like, okay, I'll try. I don't know if I can. I really don't know what's possible. And the funny thing is that when I was kind of mad that day, like, people don't want this energy. There's so much of it. I'd like to share it. Not in terms of like some woo-woo thing, but just, here's a nice piece of chocolate. Would you like some? Just lovely, friendly gestures like that. I'd rather do it that way, in like this very humble human way, than, here, let me sit here and like stare in your eyes and then say, I wonder if you see what I see, which is what that guy said to me when I was in Santa Barbara 8 years ago. He said, we did the stare thing in a cafe for like 10 minutes without blinking, and then he said, I wonder if you see what I see. And I think he gave me some of that vision. And he passed on the same capacity to have a relationship with nature. So hopefully I did that. I really don't know. It's not up to me. It's a matter of grace and luck. For some reason, I feel like I've been touched with that sometimes. I don't know. I also feel like my capacity to possibly be a healer is coming online a bit. So if I'm able to develop capacity to heal with my hands, then I don't have to use all these words. I don't have to say, here, let me convince you of something. If I can stare in someone's eyes for a few minutes and give them my hands, that's a lot easier than all these like millions of words that I've created for myself. Not that that's wrong. It was an important step. And in these past couple months, I had this phase of trying to explain myself, but that really created the self. By trying to explain something that's unexplainable, it makes it seem like a personal thing. But when one's able to heal and look at someone with the light of love, this golden green light from the heart, just say, here, have this. Just like, take it. It's right here. Take it. And not like, this and that and this explanation and quantum this and quantum that and reading a huge book on quantum physics. It's just like, here's my hand. Look in my eyes. And then I get that person's gift as well. Like, the thing we don't realize when we get jealous and angry if somebody else is starting to shine a little bit, like they do with so-called bipolar, is that when we're able to look at someone with complete unconditional love, that light unconditions the person, gives them permission to flower as themselves. And when we really do that, we actually download that person's miracle body gift. Like, we don't get the whole thing, they get it because they get to embody it and flower into it. But we get a subtle impression of it. So then that capacity could come in handy at some point. And I did that with a homeless man too. When I took him out to coffee, we stared in each other's eyes, and I feel like I downloaded the strength of the homeless people. Like, they trust me, and I see that I am one of them. And, I'm 1 second away from being homeless and on the streets and rejected myself. And so, when I needed that strength to sort of just be laying on the street and all of a sudden get up, I had that strength to get out of there, and that was a gift from them. So, I owe them something. I don't know. I can't create an idea to act on that. Doesn't matter. There's no separate things. But anyway, I feel like it's great lately that I've had the chance to have an example of embodying something like passing on this quantum capacity of, it's just the brain speeding up and being able to see what's right around us and know how to appropriately utilize it to take care of ourselves, our bodies, but the bodies of others, keep each other safe, you know, not leave like tripping hazards around, like take care of the scene, take care. It's really not complicated. It's so simple. It's a few simple gestures, and that whole vision would come into fruition. We'd enjoy the fruits of that together. And I don't know if I said this already, but as humanity, we sort of have this sense like that if I fly and flower and become myself, that prevents the person beside me from doing so. But if I don't flower, then the other person doesn't, and we both stay comfortable. So that would be like saying, if there are two birds on the ground, that if one bird decides to take off and fly, that means the other one can't, or it actually decreases the ability of the second bird to fly. But like and that's absolutely not true. The sky is infinite. One bird takes off into the sky, the next bird, if it takes off a second later, has just as much space to fly as the one that took off right before, because it won't necessarily catch up. So, and also if there's a whole flock of birds, one bird takes off, they all start taking off because they think, oh, there's a reason this one took off. So one bird flying actually really increases the likelihood that all the birds can fly. And when they fly together in a flock, it's easier to fly because they change the aerodynamics of the wings by the formations they fly in. So we don't experience this as a flock of humanity. We think, oh, they're flying, that means I can't. And that's just absolutely not true. There's space for all of us to be exactly who we came here to be. And when we can see each other's gifts and see each other's possibilities just by looking in each other's eye, we start bringing that person things that will help them with their possibility without even knowing why. And that's what happens in synchronicity. People start bringing us what we need, and we're like, how is this happening? But it's somebody saw our possibility. And so there's this possibility energy magnet sort of around us, and people pick up on that, and then they say things to us which are exactly what we need to hear, and we think, or exactly what we need in that moment. So what happens when we're able to act on the moment appropriately, whoever's around us, there's this momentum of they will act with us appropriately. Instead of bringing us some kind of crappy drama, they'll bring us like a piece of chocolate, or they'll bring us, you know, exactly what we were needing in the moment, or say something and we're like, oh, that's kind of what I was investigating. They'll tell us about a book and we'll be like, yeah, I want to read that. So all of a sudden we start talking about helpful, uplifting, wonderful things, and we start building energy. And I don't know why there's this field that would want us to start to drown again, because what happens is then we need to rely on others. And the thing is, like, the economy thinks if they don't scare us into buying stuff, we won't buy stuff. But we would buy stuff. Like, the economy would continue, and it would be a lot more beautiful if we weren't trying to keep each other mediocre and then buying mediocre stuff. Anyway, I will stop now. I need to get back to reading this, but I think I'm seeing a lot, and there's so much more to talk about that I've written down, but not enough time to talk about it all right now. Back to studying. So these dream and creates are for my partner, and that's why they're pointed out so the other can read them. And these ones are for me. Dream, create. And then of course I have the cosmos and the rainbow bracelet. I did give a cosmos and rainbow away yesterday, so I need to wear some over here to give away at some point. And I met a friend, so I'm going to give them a little cosmos bracelet with a special message. I got these star essences in the mail. Pineal light infusion and 13th gate. So I've talked to myself a little bit along the way, but not really that much. And the few times I did talk to myself, I said to myself, I need to keep up this conversation with myself a bit. But I haven't really done that. So here's my next attempt to try to do that. And it's for a few reasons. The other night I had a rapid slowing down in my brain, like one of those death experiences. And then I felt slow and kind of heavy and everything, and I'm feeling a bit better for sure. And I've been exploring relationship, and it's a blessing and really fun. And I'm also seeing that I've learned a lot how to manage my life by myself with this sort of bipolar thing, but when another person is in the picture, it's a totally different thing. And part of it is that it's really hard to explain how my brain works to another person. I've spent the last 2.5 years kind of explaining and unfolding and extrapolating my brain with myself. And then to be all of a sudden with somebody and try to explain that in a sentence is impossible. And sometimes it makes me flat, and sometimes it makes me energetically try to explain things or appear as defending myself. And it's challenging. And then other manifestations have happened where I start sharing my story and then literally sort of get cut off by saying, oh yeah, I was sharing how I was when I first got to California. And then it was said to me, yeah, she was interrupting everybody. And for me, I didn't experience it that way. I experienced it as my brain really speeds up sometime, and I'm not interrupting. I appear as interrupting, but my brain is just responding so fast that I just speak. It just comes out of my mouth. And I tried to explain that, and somehow when the opposite happens, when somebody explains like, I need a lot of time, can you give me some time to talk? I need extra time to say what I need to say. People are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But when somebody says, I don't need any extra time, I'm going to be like saying things really quick. As soon as I see what I say, I'm just going to be saying it. But when it's too fast, then that's kind of not okay. And there could be some truth to that. And there is some truth to that. And since then, I have slowed down a lot. And that was part of my point, is like, this is temporary. I'll be like this for a month or a week or a day or 2 weeks. I really don't know. And this place here with the energy and the fact that it's dialogue based gave me that open space to not only say what I quickly saw in terms of a perception, but also to try to quickly explain myself as to why I'm responding so quickly. And I did that quickly too, which just makes everything seem even more quick. And how do you explain that? And it was literally at times people like saying, be quiet, shut up. And you know, for myself, I know that's true, that a lot of people don't want to hear this. What I've said to myself over these years and the context I've built is not for everybody. And not only that, not everybody wants to hear what I have to say live in person when I'm interacting with them. And that's one of the reasons why I talk with myself, and I haven't as much lately. And I'm seeing that if I do, then I feel less need to explain myself. At least I didn't really feel that much need to explain myself or talk about this with other people in my daily life back home, because I had this relationship with myself. But then here, not only am I manifesting as different and, you know, capricious, up and down in mood, and even though I don't really experience moods per se, I experience these just really different behavior patterns depending on what's going on. To be in a community, like, again, because I haven't lived in community for a long time, people notice because there's different combinations of people around. So people notice that I'm being different because I was different an hour ago than I am now, or 5 minutes ago. Sometimes I'd be like, you know, you're my best friend and I love you and all this in dialogue. And then the next minute I'd be like 5 minutes later, I'd be like, but this part of my life is none of your business. So I'd manifest as like, I love you, blah, blah, blah. And then the next moment I'd be like, there's a part of my life that's none of your business. And putting up that firm boundary just as a result of how the dialogue was going. And people would be like, oh, how come you just were all lovey? And then the next moment you're like being so like harsh or whatever. I'm like, and before that I had just explained that I'm going to rapidly change from one manifestation to the next. And I said, I just explained this was going to happen, and then it happened. So, and then when I start saying things like that, it's like, you know, prophecy of myself, or it can get to the point where I'm writing prophecy about the world, because I can say what's going to happen and then it does for myself. But that can, and then that brings in the point of the power of the words that we use and what we say and what we talk about. And that's kind of the whole fundamental point of why I was talking with myself, because I realized the power of the human voice and body giving voice to what it is that one sees in the moment. It's not necessarily relevant the next, but with this speeding up of the brain, one can talk and talk and talk and talk. And that can manifest if one can eventually move into a place where they have an audience, you know, they share every day on YouTube or video, but if there's no audience, one doesn't really need an audience. One can talk with oneself on video, and that's the thing. The video doesn't interrupt. The video doesn't say, oh, you're being rude. Oh, stop talking. You're talking too fast. All these things that like psychiatrists or other people would say. This nice high-powered iPhone XS Max doesn't say any of that to me. So I can just talk and say whatever I would like. And what I would really like to say is what I wish. Like, what do I wish for my life? What do I wish? And by talking with myself, I've actually been able to live some of my dreams. And that's part of what I would like to share with other people is, hey, we have the technology. Take out your phone. If you don't have a really good phone, use the voice memos on your phone and just talk with yourself and try to make sense of things in your own voice and for yourself, for your own subjectivity. So I've developed this really wide subjectivity. And the other thing that's been happening for me is when I say things, people don't understand, how did I come up with that? Or they don't understand what I said because it's not really associated with anything that the person said, because my brain doesn't work based on association. It's not checking with different associations and coming up with the best association in its memory file bank. It's just seeing something and saying it from a different field. I don't know, who knows? There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but it moves really fast, and the speed, it makes other people uncomfortable for sure, because they don't understand where I'm getting that from. And then they start questioning like me, like, who are you? What are you? Blah, 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 all this stuff, because what I'm saying can't come from the knowledge bank of a self. Sometimes. Now I've gone more into that manifestation for sure in the last while, and it's nobody's fault. It's sort of, I had that peak of energy and now it's on a decline. So now I'm manifesting more as like kind of insecure, kind of like a bit jealous with my partner, and all these sort of self-manifestations. But I think there's a lot more to it than those basic things. What I'm seeing a bit is that I need to keep my relationship with myself, because what happens is I'm like, well, people aren't listening to me, or they're not interested in my story. It's not even a story. They're not interested in what I have to say. And that's okay. Most people aren't interested in what I have to say or what anyone else has to say. They're mostly interested in what they have to say. So why not say it to ourselves? And that's part of what I do, because I have a lot to say in general. when I share my story with people in like certain settings, I can talk for like an hour and a half, and I haven't even shared that much of it. So I can talk a lot, and I understand that. Other people need space to talk. I am also a really good listener, believe it or not, because I was trained as a peer support worker, and my job is to listen. And here, I'm not a peer support worker, I'm in a community. And what I've learned, I think, is that I would like my own space and to not live in community for a while, because I'm seeing that when one is around other people, it sort of invites the other person's stuff and projections into one's life. And one has to be able to have the strength to transmute that or deal with that in some way. And one can't escape from life, that's for sure. But basically what it comes down to is I want to create something to help people like me feel safe to go out and explore. And there are programs out there. There's Wellness Recovery Action Plan, which is really helpful. And there's also Bipolar in Order. I think there's a lot of good stuff there too. And Tom Wooten talks about getting to this freedom stage where one can function in all states. And I did take his class one time, even though he recommends repeating it over and over for like 2 years. I just took it once. I don't like to get into repetition and doing too much of one thing because I can't remember. I don't want to repeat. So yeah, I don't really get into the space where I'm like, I need this path in order to help me anymore. And I do feel like what I'm seeing too with how I feel this trigger or attachment to someone close to me not being interested in my story, like literally being like, oh, you were being rude, and then saying to the person there, why don't you share your story? And it's happened like a number of times. So I'm questioning, do I need my partner to know my story? Do I want them to? Do I have a story? Is this an old story that needs to be dropped? This whole like mental health thing. If I am in this freedom stage of so-called bipolar, now I'm free to sort of explore a relationship, but I don't know if I'm doing the greatest job. I was making my partner feel kind of like a bad person yesterday for liking on Facebook and stuff. And I feel a little bit triggered by that because for me, I like to use my phone for creative stuff. I'm helping somebody with like a GoFundMe campaign. I'm sending out stuff to friends back home who are struggling and trying to connect them with people because they have nobody over the holidays. I really feel like I use technology and it doesn't really use me. And so I just feel like I sort of saw how, somebody's like, oh, I'm really tired. And then a few minutes later, they're looking at their phone and like, then they look all like content, like this content look on the face, like, and I almost felt like, wow, this technology is really making the brain so it can't act, and the body just feels tired. So a person will lay there and look at the phone. And I don't know if that's true, but I just really kind of was shocked, like, oh my goodness, this isn't benign, this constant checking of the phone. And I check my phone a lot too, but I'm not checking to like stuff. And this brings me to my own thing. It's not about anyone else. It's about how I want to create this thing to help move the body in actuality instead of, we're getting reduced to like this laying down and going like this. And that's an important thing to be able to do, and understanding how to use the phones and the technology really well and creatively is super important. But to use it in this sort of passive and trained mode is really dangerous, and it makes the body tired because it's just so habituated, and the brain is so habituated to looking at this little screen. And that's what I'm doing now, is looking at this little screen, but I'm moving my whole body. I'm not looking at a screen and going like this. I'm moving my body, I'm talking, I can see like the things that I put on my wrists to share with other people. And a woman came by the other day, and then I gave her a couple of these hair ties. I got the big bag of these hair ties, and I said, well, they're hair ties, and they're kind of like friendship bracelets. So I gave her a few, and so that's sort of one of the gestures that I'm practicing with, is like gesture of like this friendship connection with a stranger. Like, I don't need to say, hey, can I add you to Facebook so you can look at my crap for the rest of your life? It could be more powerful to give out just a little gesture, instead of like, now you have to know all my psychological content for the rest of my life, or the rest of their life, or what have you. And one of the reasons I bought this iPhone is because it has like 500 gigabytes of memory. So I can like just create all this stuff and not worry about really running out of space. And I bought ashwagandha on Amazon Prime. And I already have this phenibut, which these two are part of Peter Smith's program to reprogram memories, and also passion flower, L-theanine, and something else like magnesium or B6. And he gives this sort of combination on his website, balancingbrainchemistry.co.uk, but he doesn't give the exact amounts. And he talks about this in terms of taking it and then going to psychotherapy to try to help reprogram memories. But since I have this relationship with myself, of talking with myself, I might try when they all are here to sort of take a combination of them and like go for a walk in the woods and talk with myself to sort of reprogram myself. And I don't know if it'll work, but I've been keeping that combination in mind as something to do, and it could be something interesting to try before I go back home in a month and a week. So that's the other thing. I'm feeling this pressure of I have to create something or start the seeds of creating it. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be quite simple. And I feel like now, since I've been here, I understand where I'd like to start. I got to register the domain name, get the email, create a Basecamp account. And I'm just going to create little sections in Basecamp with different bits of information and help for people and things for creativity, and then just invite people to that. So it's a little community for people who have these sped up brains. Oh, something hit my stomach and I feel kind of ill. My guts have been really bad, like very loose for 2 months. I had like one solid BM yesterday, I think, and it was like the only one. So a lot of energy, a lot of detox. I might have to go eat a piece of bread or something to not vomit. I don't know what I was talking about, but I don't know if I said the part yet about how with these things that I'm being triggered with lately in relationship and with other people, because I'm in this lower energy state of sort of seeing things and relating them to me and making them about me and my story. What about me? So it's kind of this self-centered state. It's looking at the world from the center of the self, like the whole world has something to do with me, which is not true, but, you know, feeling like I need to be heard by somebody in particular denies the truth that I can be heard by myself on video, or, you know, I can look inward and inquire and figure stuff out for myself. And also, I have figured out a lot for myself to get me to this point. A lot of people who get diagnosed, they live a really hard life. And I do sometimes, but I've managed to live my dreams, and I need to keep that as a focus, like keep myself well enough to see Celine Dion. I've paid, you know, over $1,000 for that trip. And so yeah, the point is that I don't need help. It's lovely to have help. Like, I don't need help for myself. I figured out the gestures and the vitamin thing, and I can do that pretty reliably. I got through it in June of this year, October of last year, which was hard, and another time before without the hospital. So I don't need the hospital. I did it all by myself in June without anyone knowing anything was going on. So I don't need somebody to support me. But then when somebody's around, I feel like I need to be able to communicate more, because these things happen and then I have to explain, oh, I'm in this lower energy state where I'm kind of selfish and insecure and all that. And usually I experience that and I'm sort of with it with myself, and I try to keep it to myself. But in a closer relationship, it's harder to do that. So how do I do that without making the other person into like a bad person, when really I'm feeling the bad personness of myself and projecting that outward onto other people? And I realized that that's what's being done. So yeah, there were a few things I did yesterday that I was like, oh, this isn't good. And then it makes me feel like being by myself until this crappy energy passes. But if I'm by myself, maybe I can create something. Instead of projecting in relationship, maybe in isolation, I can create something that can help people. Because I don't think people need help per se. I don't like that framework of even looking at people like they need help or my help. It's from that viewpoint comes like, I need to give you advice or tell you what to do. And I don't think that's quite right. But for me, I've shared, oh, this is what I've done. So I sort of want to share self-dialogue as a process, as a possibility. And also, epigesturetics and harvesting one's mania or creativity. And I've talked about these things along the way, and I've sort of done it for myself to some extent, but I haven't put it into some kind of like concise thing that is watchable. And that's what I want to do next. To help people like me, because what I'm seeing here is I'm surrounded by people that aren't like me. They don't have a diagnosis of so-called bipolar. So they don't have this propensity to rapidly speed up. And I'm seeing how the people are very open and compassionate and everything, but they're still like, why are you doing that? Explain yourself. That's, I've been called, I don't even remember the words because I'm not all about words and stuff, but rude, interrupting, like kind of arrogant, yeah, and a bunch of words that actually I would assume that any person who doesn't have a diagnosis of bipolar would project and label onto a person who has bipolar. Now, I still think being in relationship with a person and being called those names is better than being in relationship with a psychiatrist and being called delusional, psychotic, having hallucinations, and stuck in a room with someone staring at you and drugging you. So this is definitely a big step in the right direction. And I actually take a lot of it as a compliment. Like, okay, I can see how I would be seen that way in the way I manifest, when here in this energy in California and where I am, there's kind of permission to manifest as so-called bipolar. But instead of people saying you need to go to the hospital, they're just like, you're being a bitch, or you're being rude, or you're being this or that. And a lot of the qualities in the heightened states of bipolar that people would say that we are, like rude, arrogant, a bunch of stuff like that, like capricious. It's better than bipolar probably, but that's how we appear to manifest, but that's not how we feel inside. We don't feel like I'm intentionally trying to be rude to you. It's more like my brain reacts so fast that I just speak so quick. I don't even plan it. I only know I'm speaking when I hear myself speaking. And that can manifest as rude. But what I'm saying is, a lot of people with this label aren't really out in a community or in like this energetic community where really people aren't looking at me like I'm so-called bipolar. They're looking at me like I'm a person, but a bitchy, rude, arrogant person. And so it is actually a blessing, what I'm trying to say. I'd rather be, I'm in a community of say like 20 people or more. And it almost takes this community of 20 people who are in dialogue and open and studying certain spiritual philosophies to hold the space for like one bipolar person. Because, you know, think about how many clinicians and all that, and psychiatrists and doctors and pharmacists, and like a bipolar person has like a team of all these people with all this professional training of so many years, like probably 100 years of professional training. And then if you take into account the time it took for all that training to come into being, like there's just like hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours of momentum of training to like keep this one so-called bipolar person alive in the world with their drugs and their clinicians and their appointments and there's no healing from psychosis, so only give this person drugs philosophy. Don't give them any type of counseling except like medication adjustment appointments. Here, I don't have any of that. I have a community of all these open people just being like, you're interrupting me and you're being a bitch. Or you seem like bitchy right now, which is kind of a mood. But for me, I feel clear, I feel quick, I feel sharp, I feel alive, I feel perceptive. So my experience of it is a certain thing, but how others experience me is different. And I am kind of different, and that's okay. And the thing that's been happening for me here is that I'm okay with the vast ways that I change in my manifestation, and it's not that I don't care what other people think, but if I start trying to guess what other people are thinking, then that I have to slow down a lot, because in order to sort of guess what other people are thinking, then I have to start playing these like mental machination games in order to start guessing what other people are thinking. And then back comes theory of mind and all this like acting based on social morality of like, oh, they're thinking this, so I should say that. And that's what slows us down, is like this pre-planning and this premeditation of what we're saying based on what we think the other person's thinking. And for me, I kind of think that people aren't thinking anything. I think people aren't thinking anything about me until they tell me. And people have been telling me here for sure. And then it's challenging to listen to that feedback, because I don't feel as much like questioning where other people are coming from. I don't say, oh, you're being too slow. But I also see a lot from what happened with this. Like there's so much to unfold here. Like in dialogue, by going so fast initially, it sort of created a crisis in people, because they're like, I can't keep up, you're talking too fast. And then they get all like psychologically annoyed to the point that they almost get angry. And then it creates this sort of, that anger almost creates this quickening effect, because when we're angry, there's an emotion and then we can't think. And we start talking without thinking when we're angry. But then we say shit that we don't want when we're angry. But the actual point is to really start speaking without thinking. So by being annoying and making people angry, it actually starts to create a crisis in the person where they get angry. And then later on, they're like, whoa, I was really angry. And they're able to look at that anger more within themselves. So what I've learned for myself here this time, at least, is that I no longer need to go into a crisis myself, but how I am, if I'm really manifesting as myself, might kind of create a crisis in another person. It's really strange. Like I had this thing happen where somebody was like almost in a crisis, and they were calling me mechanical. They were saying like, you're like a machine just like all the rest of us. And I said, speak for yourself. And then I did this like interpretive dance for like 10 seconds. And I was like, ooh, 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 like I'm not a robot, like here. And the person literally fell on the floor. Like, it's like they were blown away by this spontaneous, creative, nothing like doing, there's nothing there doing it. There's no self. And that was the thing. Like when people were trying to get me to explain myself, it created this self that was explaining itself, but there is no self. And how do you explain there's no self? But explaining creates the appearance of the self, and then makes the other person feel comfortable that there's a self there explaining itself. It's this really weird thing. So there was this long phase, I'm talking about the last 2.5 months here, like just bits of it. There was this long phase of appearing to need to explain myself. And here, two people like, where are you Like some people are even calling me AI. Like, are you AI? Are you robot? That was kind of a bigger compliment than like a bipolar or something. But it is kind of like AI in a way, because not A, but intelligence. It's just really fast. Intelligence is fast. Thought-based, pre-planning, pre-programmed, pre-cognitive processes are a lot slower. They're kind of like the speed of the contraction of the brain. Like, I don't know how fast the nerve impulses go. I should look that up. Like speed of nerve impulses versus the speed of light. Because not only that is usually people respond to their own projection, like an image, which I think is sort of like this holographic, holophonic dust. Like these past memories are this like dust collection in the brain of like bits of holographic light. So there are people who think that the universe is sort of holographic. And I'm seeing that it's possible that the brain works on holograms because it can recall the past and imagine the future. And that's a holographic thing. And also, and that seems really fast. Like a hologram is not really there, so it can be recalled really fast. But the thing that creates the slowness is that the self that thinks that it's there is like a holographic, holophonic piece of dust. And then it looks at the next one, which is association. So it's associating with things. So it's the speed of association, which is kind of slow, because one thought is like a holographic, holophonic piece of dust is like this image of a memory, and then also the sound that goes with it, which is the thought. Like, and then we hear that thought in our head, and then if it's a good one, we decide to say it. And that whole thing doesn't happen in so-called transconsciousness. It's, we're saying it at the same time that we see it. Like the flash of light is the sound that comes out. And that's a lot faster than a holographic, holophonic piece of dust looking at another one and then picking it. It's like a few times faster. So a person who has this speeded up brain can always get their word in quicker. They can always beat out the thought form because they can see something a lot faster. And I feel that this is part of our role, is to speak, because we speak so quickly and from nothingness sometimes that can sort of overwrite the thinking. And people don't like that, because thought really wants to be like to have its opinions passed along. So it's really complicated, and it could be possible that words aren't sufficient, because a lot of this world is a war of words, and people with this transconscious, they get into this poetic, metaphoric consciousness, and then they're talking and other people are like, but I want to be heard in my story and blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of what's happening to me right now, is like, listen to my story. What about me? And it's kind of lame. So the blessing of being here and in relationship with people here and the energy is that I can really see what these things are doing, these thoughts and these processes. And I've been doing the reversing of it a bit, like Byron Katie does with her process of turn it around, which I don't really resonate with when I'm in this really heightened state, because things are just happening so fast. There's nothing to turn around. The turnaround happens when people come back at me and say, you're talking too fast. It's like feedback. You get the feedback from the universe, and that's the only thing you can rely on, is the feedback from the universe. But in the slower brain state, one takes things personally, and then if one takes something personally and records it as like, oh, this happened to me, and like you didn't listen to my story, then now I can look at that inside. But when it's the speeded up process, it can only really be observed through feedback of the universe, which I was a little bit slow to take on in terms of slow down. but I couldn't slow down. Only the feedback could eventually slow me down. And that's sort of what happens to us when we go into so-called mania. We go into the world, we're like really fast, and we're moving in this fast speed in society, and then eventually society slows us down and we collapse and go into a psych ward or something. But we can learn to collapse without going to a psych ward. We can learn to rest, we can learn to slow down. And we don't even, like, I slow myself down with the epigestretics of vitamins and things. But I think I haven't really been slowing myself down with it. I've been taking a pretty consistent regime. And then sometimes not taking the extra speedy stuff like SAMe, tyrosine, and methylfolate and things. But I have been lately, because I think just providing all those nutrients gives the body a chance, and the situation and the way life manifests and unfolds, the opportunity to utilize those nutrients as the intelligence of the body sees fit. And I do adjust it slightly. Like I read through all my balancing brain chemistry notes and made notes of a few small adjustments I could do, like adding some tryptophan in the morning as well as at night to sort of keep me a little slower and support serotonin in the morning. I added zinc instead of at night, only breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to sort of slow me down as well, just to, because I was doing more of like take all the sleepy stuff at night and the speedy stuff in the morning, but I think supporting all aspects during the day is helpful. So I've been doing that, and that's going well. I'll continue with that. And yeah, so there's so much to this, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm hoping that here it's allowing me to get clear and embody certain things. I've gotten clear about who I am in terms of my like sexuality, at least for now. I don't know, it could change. I have no idea. You can't predict these things. But then this other thing has happened, and I'll go into this next. It's almost the end of 2018, and it's the 29th of December, and I have a couple more days to create. And right now I'm adding a little bit to my video's description in order to, request gifts in kind for what I've created. And then, not put any ads on them or anything like that. And I don't know if they have any value, but basically kind of doing this in case I want to just like release it all at some point. Because 2019, I just have this feeling that it's going to be challenging. Like, I've gotten to a certain point, I've lived certain dreams, and I'm going to be living the dream of seeing Celine Dion in concert later this week. But there's a lot of different things that I still have to face and integrate, like my family, my sexual orientation. A lot of my friends back home don't really know my sexual orientation, and I've been hiding that. We're just really not making it anyone's business. And there's other things that are sort of hiding in plain sight that this mental health diagnosis has allowed me to face in little bits. And I've continued to live my life as I want, and I feel like since I've lived as a pretty good person since I read The Power of Now many years ago, which I definitely recommend, The Power of Now. That helped me stop thinking and not think as much. And I've been able to be present a lot. And I think I've, done some good in the world. Whereas before, I really think, before reading The Power of Now, I don't think I had that much good in me. I think I was born like afraid. And there were certain like traumatic events in my life that probably made it worse. And they aren't exactly excuses or anything, but I see that, you know, I don't think I could change anything. You can't even change one little tiny vibration of something, because if you think that way, or if I think that way, I should say, I wouldn't be sitting here right now living the dream of being in California. I won't be staying the extra 2 months that I was thinking I would. But now I feel like, you know, I've lived that dream. I've been to California, I think 5 or 6 times in the last 3 years or 4 years. And when I was diagnosed, I never thought I'd get back. And then there's tough times to weather the storm, and I see that there's certain relationships in my life that are strained, and they're not going to be not strained unless I do something great. And I don't think anything great can be done. It's like greatness moment to moment, or not greatness, but excellence in movement, in, you know, what we utilize as products, what we buy. You know, the economy is such a big thing in life. So, you know, buying things that are really good for the world and good for our bodies, and created by good people. So I consider myself to be like a non-specialist, and through that I haven't really focused on much of anything, but I've learned a lot about what people are doing, and, you know, utilizing their passions and what they've spent maybe their whole life working on, utilizing what they created. And so I want to share some of that, because being here in California, I brought some of my favorite things, and people are really enjoying that. In terms of the water here is really gross, and I have a friend who created this water revitalizer device that goes on the shower, and because I've been filling up the water with that, everybody's been able to drink the water here, so that saves money. It also, like, every bit of water that someone drinks that's restructured helps their body, hydrates them, moves them in a better way, and then also it's like, as the shower is running, it's restructuring and revitalizing the water of the world. So there's just a lot of dimensions enfolded and manifest in that one product. So this year, for 2019, I really want to be creative, and I'm starting to create some stuff, and I've found certain resources that make it seem like the technology won't really be a barrier anymore when it was before. So yeah, there's kind of like no excuse not to create something great, and not only for me, but for other people. Like, there's so many people suffering and struggling, and you know, life is precious and it's not guaranteed one moment to the next. And I feel like I've survived some pretty harsh things up until this point. Doesn't mean I'm guaranteed to, but I've had some insights around how one can't really die until one is meant to, of course. And maybe I haven't so far because there's something that I'm meant to do. And I could create all kind of visions about what that is. But I feel like it's to be myself. And maybe when I really connect with who that is, maybe that will be the last moment that I'm alive, when I fully am myself. And I'm pretty close to being my full self, but there's still certain trust wounds that I need to heal. I'm taking the class with Steve Pavlina that is about subjective reality, and I think that's it's really helpful for me in this point in my journey right now, in terms of getting in alignment with exactly what I want in life. And I feel like this whole, like, so-called bipolar thing is almost more evident now because I feel really strong boundaries about what I want and what I don't want ultimately, and even in any given moment. Like this morning, I sort of said yesterday, I'm going to spend some time creating tomorrow. And then there was like, oh, let's go do this. And I was like, well, I need to do this. And so I stuck with that. And I'm glad I did, because there are a few things that I wanted to create and get in order. And right now, as I'm talking, I'm putting this paypal.me link on my videos because I haven't shared them, but I do have a sense that, you know, if I get to this point at some point where I feel like, oh, I have nothing to lose anymore, you know, healing whatever needs to be healed and being able to laugh at it and be laughed at and all these things at the same time, then I might just kind of share it. I've been thinking of ways to share it, like embed private video on my nutsaboutmelons.org website. But right now, as we speak, since it's the end of the year, I'm just sort of putting these links and saying, well, I work for Gifts in Kind. People on disability are allowed to work for Gifts in Kind. And I'm not on disability right now because I'm not in Canada, but, you know, if I need to release this for some reason, if I find myself all alone, and I see several possibilities of how things might unfold. And, you know, I have like maybe a job offer when I go back home, but I'd still have to uphold a certain image of myself. And I don't know, you know, as like a person with a mental illness, and maybe I am, maybe I'm not, maybe I was just sort of born evil. I opened up this little Bible that was in the cupboard today, and it was on page 117, and it was, I haven't read the Bible, but it was a recognizable part where whoever's talking about it's talking about the blind leading the blind and how we're all in the same boat, sort of, and, you know, how can I point out the speck in another's eye when there's like, you know, a mountain of dirt in my own. And that's very true, you know, even in terms of how at times I've been critical about certain things. As soon as I get into this sort of like angry criticism in my disposition, it comes back at me, whether I'm talking to somebody else like here, or even when I was talking to myself, you know, things would come back to me like, wow, you have sometimes maybe been in situations where you don't even, you know, quote, deserve to live, or there's something that I survived that I really don't know how, and now I've gotten to this point of kind of integrating it and realizing that, you know, I can't actually pass on until I'm meant to, and I'm still here to resolve, I don't know if it's karma. So yeah, I haven't kept up on posting my videos since I've gotten here to California for the 3 months. So I'll probably work on those when I get back to Canada. Right now, it's about living the dream of Celine Dion. And I think 2019 is going to be a really challenging year. And I really don't know what's going to happen. Of course, we never do. But if I can survive 2019, then I can probably survive for a long time in life. So I'm going to focus on creating something, and I am focused on that right now. It's really to help other people like me who were labeled with a mental illness, which I feel is, I'm not against that for myself because it has been helpful in terms of, you know, having these extreme amounts of suffering come up in manageable doses. And then I take medications to sort of tone it down. because sometimes it feels like one could see the implications of every molecule vibrating since the beginning of time. And it's way too much information to process. And then not only that, but how one's life is part of that whole ripple effect or butterfly effect, and the wrongs and the rights, and trying to make the wrong right, and seeing at a certain point in perspective that everything is just right no matter what or how we've interpreted it or may be interpreted. So I feel like I could be kind of left on my own, and in so-called psychosis, I've often felt like I could end up homeless, or I feel like a homeless person, and that's so painful. I think the pain of it is seeing how one ended up homeless, like being rejected for who one is and what one has done. And certain things, I guess, are deal breakers, and then people just don't want anything to do with that person. And I feel fortunate that I haven't committed any crimes. And I've had crimes against me that I haven't said too much about, and I feel like, who am I to say or blame anyone? And sometimes there's this energy that comes in that everything feels so amazing, and it's so creative, and it shares, and it's generous, and it's learning, and it's fun and helpful, and everything in all dimensions. And then sometimes when it's withdrawn, I've seen a lot this time how when the energy is withdrawn, it makes it so it's hard to act quickly and creatively and spontaneously and helpfully, like so quickly being helpful that I don't even have time to think, oh, this person didn't do this or they did this. Like there's no observing in terms of measuring who's doing what, because one is so busy doing all that one can that it doesn't really matter what other people are doing. They're doing the best that they can too, in whatever state they're in at the time. So it brings in this sort of humility and acceptance and forgiveness and so many things, and compassion. And I really do feel that this is a friendly, compassionate universe. And I feel like this year will be the test of that. Like, I don't know if there's some kind of overall measuring device that the universe does to decide who stays in this physical manifestation and who doesn't. And I don't know. Yeah, I just feel like really, I'm sorry for the things that I've done that have wronged people or hurt people. I know there's a certain point in time in my life where I got to this place where it was very, 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 very rare where I would want to intentionally harm somebody with like even a single thought. I really am fortunate that I really do become quite happy when other people are happy. It makes me happy, and I like that about myself. So I like a lot of the qualities that I have now, and I feel like I've changed a lot. But I do feel like those qualities that aren't good, these sort of, I don't know, like nobody knows how another person experiences their internal subjectivity, but mine's often very silent. And then there's also this awareness that I feel like I was born with some kind of like evil karma inside. And I think it came from, well, maybe it's just me, or maybe it's all the different patterns that led up to me being formed in this world. I don't know what it is. And I feel like, I don't know. Some things, like there's some things you can't do anything about. And then there's certain things that maybe there's a creative way to create forgiveness and also acceptance. But whatever's happened, I feel like my range of acceptance of others is quite wide. And I'm not sure how that is with others, but I can only be concerned with myself and my own capacities. And right now I'm trying to build some skills, like creating this website, this new one, and a few things, and I'm hoping to be able to help others to do the same, like me, because oftentimes we're trapped or isolated. It might be hard to go outside because of some like anxiety, as it's called, or one's just isolated and doesn't have a reason to go outside. One doesn't have many friends. Maybe one is living in a basement with the family, and the family sort of kindly trying to help, but also are so worried that it's really hard to start to build a life. I feel like once one is in a basement, sort of trapped there, it's really hard to get out, because one needs like a safe, comfortable environment where the nervous system can really relax before one can really start exploring and building one's life. It's kind of like housing first. They have that for people who are homeless, and I feel like that needs to be also true for people who have a mental health diagnosis. Like, make sure the housing is really, really right for them, because sometimes people by default end up living with their parents, but that's not right. And because a lot of times there's like relationship problems and troubles from either the diagnosis, or the diagnosis sort of brings certain things to a head and intensifies them, but those patterns were there before. And for me, I want to be able to heal those relationships, and I won't be able to do it by living in the basement there. So I do have to indeed create something. And I have already, but I don't know if that's the right thing to share. And I don't know, I'm just sort of, the thing about what I've created and talking to myself is that people might think, oh, that's what I should try. And it could fail. And most of the things that I've tried fail, like doing the Hearty Nutritionals thing failed. I could try again. I think what happened was there was a lot of this unresolved psychological content that came bubbling up, and I dealt with a lot of it, and I didn't really deal with much of it, but I did learn my strength. For example, being in like a psychosis and being able to work at a warehouse on night shifts for a month. So it was a crappy time, but instead of just sitting in a psych ward, I was able to make money, a couple $1,000s in a crappy state where I wouldn't, I'd just be watching Netflix probably anyway. And I did do that with the time off that I had. So I was able to be productive anyway. And then here, this time, feeling sort of almost this rapid cycling thing happen where I have like an extreme drop in energy and I feel so heavy, but being able to get up and do stuff anyway, and almost let the heaviness be there, and then it eventually wears off. So instead of the heaviness turning into like this personal problem of a depression, it's just sort of molasses, really slow to get moving in the morning. But once I get in the shower, I have an insight into something, and then, from there, I do the next thing. And I haven't really had depression, especially since being on this program with Peter Smith. So the thing with Peter Smith's program, I haven't had depression or anything like that, but I haven't been able to fully be off the meds, whereas with the Hearty Nutritionals, I was off the meds for 5 months. So when I go back home to Canada, when I am back in an environment where I have healthcare, if something happens, I might try to be without the 50 milligrams of quetiapine I've been taking. But in terms of resolving this thing that's happened, or basically I need to be able to be free, to be creative, and have sources of income that don't require that I be in some other structure that someone else has created, like another company or anything like that. for a lot of different reasons. And so I'm in the process of doing that, and I'm hopefully going to possibly incorporate when I get back. I don't know if that's necessary. I'd like to be incorporated somehow. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but yeah, I'm sort of planning for different possibilities, like the possibility of getting a job. There's a possibility after being back in Canada for a while, for a month, I might come back down to California. Lots of different things at the same time. And sometimes this space opens up where it almost seems like all of a sudden there's so many possibilities, and one has to, this is kind of frozen now. What page am I on here? I have to go through some time to sort of see how the universe rearranges itself to see what possibilities to step into. And there's this sort of possibility of the job, and then a possibility of kind of wandering off on my own. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I think that no matter what happens, I'll be able to handle it now that I feel like I have the tools to create something to mitigate whatever it is that, there's this like karma energy trying to catch up with me, and I'm managing to stay one step beyond that a little bit.